What happens when a CEO walks into his own luxury car showroom and discovers what's really going on behind the shiny surface? Dominic Hayes, the CEO of a top-tier luxury car dealership chain, had built his business from nothing over the past 10 years. He took pride in offering clients a high-end experience and creating a supportive workplace for his employees. But recently, something didn't feel right. Complaints from customers about late deliveries and rude staff had been increasing, and more employees were quitting than ever before. Even though his showroom directors told him everything was fine, the complaints didn't match the rumors he had been hearing. Feeling frustrated and wanting to see the truth with his own eyes, Dominic made the decision to go undercover at one of his showrooms. He chose a busy, high-end location in the city, 2 hours from his main office, far enough that no one would know who he was, since most staff had never met him face to face. To stay unnoticed, Dominic let his beard grow scruffy, swapped his sharp suits for a leather jacket and jeans, and wore sleek sunglasses. He no longer looked like the clean-cut CEO shown on the company's website. When he entered the showroom around midday, it was full of chatter and the soft sound of luxury cars being inspected. The space looked neat but slightly worn, with carpets showing signs of heavy use. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't the sleek and inspiring place Dominic had imagined when he first launched the company. A young saleswoman with tired eyes came up to him. Her name tag said Elena Carter. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Lux Motors," she greeted him, her voice friendly but strained. Dominic noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the unsure smile. Something seemed wrong, but he decided to ignore it for now. "I'm just browsing," he replied, settling into a seat near the window where he could watch what was going on. Elena nodded and quickly moved away, weaving between clients with practiced skill. Dominic watched as she handled many questions, answered phone calls, and filled out paperwork. She was clearly doing too much, but never let her tiredness show in front of clients. When Elena came back to check on him, Dominic asked her about a custom Ferrari on display. As she jotted down notes for another customer, a loud voice rang out from the manager's office. "Elena, what's taking so long? You're behind again." The voice belonged to a tall man in his 40s, wearing an expensive but messy suit. Dominic figured he was the showroom manager. The man hadn't introduced himself when Dominic arrived, something Dominic noticed right away. Elena flinched but quickly answered, "Coming right up," her voice shaking a bit. Dominic frowned. He had built this business to make sure employees felt respected, not yelled at in front of wealthy clients. He sipped his complimentary espresso and kept watching. As he waited, he picked up parts of conversations from nearby clients. A rich couple complained about the delay with their custom Lamborghini, while two younger clients whispered about how the manager had treated their sales rep poorly earlier. The atmosphere felt tense, far from the luxury experience Dominic had promised. When Elena returned with Ferrari brochures, she softly said without looking him in the eye, "Sorry about the wait." "No worries," Dominic replied with a small smile. "You're doing great." Her eyes met his briefly, surprised, then she nodded and rushed away. Dominic had just started flipping through the brochures when he heard soft sobbing from the manager's office. He froze, his espresso cup halfway to his lips. The crying grew louder. It was clearly Elena. He put the cup down and leaned in to hear better. "I'm doing my best, okay?" Her voice broke through the thin walls. "I haven't had a break in 6 hours, and I'm trying everything I can." The manager's reply was cold and harsh. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe this isn't the right job for you. We don't have time for excuses." Dominic felt sick. He couldn't just sit there. He stood up, leaving the brochures behind, and walked toward the office. What he saw made his chest tighten. Elena was standing with shaking hands, wiping her eyes with her sleeve, while the manager towered over her, arms crossed and face full of anger. Two mechanics nearby looked away, clearly uncomfortable but doing nothing. Dominic clenched his fists, his heart racing. This was not the company he had built. "Is there a problem here?" Dominic asked, his voice steady but firm. The manager turned, startled. No, just a small misunderstanding," he replied nervously. Elena shook her head, tears still in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Dominic looked at her, then at the manager, finally seeing the hard truth about what his employees were going through every day. He didn't say who he was yet. Instead, he calmly said, "She looks like she needs a break. Why don't you let her sit down for a few minutes?" The manager scoffed. We're short-staffed. There's no time for breaks when it's busy. Dominic's jaw clenched. There's always time to treat people with respect, he said evenly. The air in the room felt heavy as Dominic locked eyes with the manager, knowing he couldn't keep quiet much longer. The manager pressed his lips into a hard line, but before he could speak, one of the mechanics, a skinny young man who seemed nervous, spoke up. Elena's been working non-stop since she got here. She hasn't even had a chance to get a drink of water. His voice was unsure but carried a quiet kind of courage. The manager glared at him. Stay out of this, Marcus. Get back to your work. Dominic glanced at Marcus, then back at the manager. And who's supposed to make sure your team can stay focused? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the pressure is coming from how things are being run here. The manager's face turned red, and his tough attitude slipped for a second. Look, I'm just doing my job. If some people can't deal with it, that's not my problem. Dominic's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. Elena, still wiping her face, looked at Dominic with a mix of confusion and quiet thanks. I'm okay, she murmured, though her voice shook. She started to walk toward the door, but Dominic gently stopped her. Take 5, he said softly. You've earned it. The manager began to argue, but Dominic raised a hand, his voice firm and clear. She's taking a break now. Elena paused, looking nervously between Dominic and the manager, before nodding and slipping out through the office doors. Dominic turned back to the manager, his tone steady but cold. What's your name? Scott, the man answered, sounding defensive. And who are you to walk in here and tell me how to run my showroom? Dominic didn't answer the question. How long have you been manager here, Scott? Scott crossed his arms. About 2 years. And I've kept things running fine, so I don't need a random customer stepping in. You call this fine? Dominic cut in, his voice raising just a bit. Your staff is overworked, clients are complaining, and you're shouting at people in front of them. That's not fine. It's chaos. Scott tried to respond, but Dominic didn't let him. You might want to think about how you're treating people, because if I were your boss, this wouldn't be acceptable. Scott's face went pale, but he quickly tried to cover it with a scoff. Right, well, you're not my boss, so? Before he could finish, the office doors opened again, and Elena walked back in, looking a little more composed. She kept her head down as she passed Scott and returned to the showroom. Dominic decided to step back for now and watch again. He gave Scott one last hard look before following Elena out. Back in his seat near the window, Dominic watched her go back to work. She moved slower now, clearly tired, but still gave a small smile to each customer she helped. He noticed her being extra patient with a wealthy couple who couldn't decide on custom options for a new Rolls-Royce. She handed them brochures and answered every question kindly. Dominic also noticed Scott staring at her from the office window with a sharp look. Dominic pulled out his phone and quietly began taking notes. He wrote down all he had seen. Scott's behavior, Elena's heavy workload, and the client complaints. He also made note of Marcus speaking up for Elena. After finishing his espresso, Dominic called Elena over. Can I get the check? He asked lightly. She nodded and quickly brought it over with the receipt. Thanks for coming in. Sorry again about earlier, she said softly. No need to say sorry, Dominic replied, slipping some cash into the billfold. You're doing great. Her cheeks turned a little pink, and she gave a small, honest smile. Thank you. As she walked away, Dominic made up his mind. He wasn't finished here, not even close. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked to the door. Before stepping out, he glanced back at the showroom. Elena was helping a customer, moving carefully but with focus. Scott was shouting orders at Marcus in the service area. Dominic's jaw clenched. He pushed open the door and walked outside, pulling out his phone. Victoria, he said when his assistant answered, clear my schedule for tomorrow and get me everything we have on the staff at the urban showroom. Employee records, performance reviews, all of it. Got it, Victoria replied without missing a beat. Anything else? Dominic looked back at the showroom one more time before walking to his car. Yeah, he said. Tell my showroom directors to be ready for a meeting. We need to talk. He ended the call and got into the driver's seat, his mind already full of plans. Tomorrow, Dominic wasn't just going to watch, he was going to act. The next morning, Dominic showed up at the showroom shortly after opening, dressed in the same simple clothes and hat as the day before. He had a small notebook tucked into his pocket and a clear purpose in his mind. He wasn't here just to watch anymore. The early hours were calm, giving him a chance to take in the scene without the pressure of a full crowd. Elena was already on the floor, moving carefully, even slower than yesterday. Her face looked tired, and her smile was faint, worn down by more than just the long hours. Scott wasn't around yet, but Marcus was busy in the service area, getting tools ready for the day. Dominic waited until Elena passed nearby with a brochure before calling her over. "Hey, Elena," he said in a friendly tone, "do you have a minute?" She looked around nervously at the few customers in the room. "Sure, but I can't stay long. We're short-staffed again." "I understand," Dominic said kindly. "Just a quick question. How long have you been working here?" Elena looked surprised by the question. "About 8 months. Why?" Dominic leaned in a little and lowered his voice. "You seem like you've got a lot on your plate. Is it always this busy?" Elena hesitated, her eyes drifting toward the office window. "It's not always the clients. Sometimes it's—" Her voice trailed off, unsure. "It's Scott, isn't it?" Dominic asked quietly. Her head snapped up in shock, eyes wide. I shouldn't say anything. I just want to understand," Dominic said gently. After a moment, Elena sighed. "It's everything. We're always short-handed, and when things get tough, Scott makes it harder. I know he's under pressure, but we end up paying for it." Dominic nodded, listening carefully. Then he asked, "And Marcus? He seems supportive." Elena's face softened slightly. "Marcus is great. He's only been here a few months, but he helps whenever someone's struggling. Honestly, without him, I probably would have quit already." Before Dominic could respond, the office door opened, and Scott walked out, immediately changing the mood in the room. Elena's body tensed, and she quickly walked away to help a customer near a Lamborghini. Scott didn't even glance at Dominic as he barked orders at Marcus, who silently nodded while checking a paint job. Dominic's jaw clenched. This wasn't just stress, it was how this place worked. He watched as the morning went on, paying attention to how Scott treated his team and how everyone worked under pressure. As the afternoon rush began, the pace picked up, and Elena was running back and forth again. Then came the first issue. An older man in an expensive suit called Elena over, annoyed about a delayed custom Ferrari order. She apologized and promised to fix it quickly. "Can't you just get it right the first time?" the man snapped. Elena blushed but stayed calm. "I'm really sorry, sir. I'll take care of it." Scott, hearing this, stormed over. "What's the problem here?" he barked. "She's got it," the man said, brushing him off. But Scott turned to Elena anyway. "How many times do I have to tell you to double-check orders? This is basic." That was it. Dominic stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "That's enough," he said, his voice strong and clear. Scott turned, fuming. "And who do you think you are?" Dominic reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Flipping it open to show his company ID, his voice was calm but firm. "I'm Dominic Hayes," he said, looking Scott dead in the eye. "I own this dealership and every other showroom like it." The room went silent. Elena froze. Marcus peeked around the corner. Even the clients stared. Scott's face drained of color, then turned red. "I didn't realize." "No, you didn't," Dominic said sharply. "Because if you did, you wouldn't treat my staff or my clients like this." Scott started to say something, but Dominic didn't let him. "Let's go to the office," he said, motioning toward the back. Scott stiffly walked that way, and Dominic followed, pausing to tell Elena, "I won't let this slide." Inside the office, Dominic closed the door. "Do you even realize how out of line you've been?" Scott opened his mouth, but Dominic held up his hand. "Don't. I've seen enough. You've been here 2 years, and in that time, you've turned this place into a toxic mess. Do you understand what that does to your team? To customers? To the business?" Scott stared at the floor, silent. "I know the job's hard," Dominic continued, "but that's no excuse for treating people like this." Scott finally spoke. "I can do better. Just, you're done," Dominic cut in, effective immediately. Scott's head snapped up. "Wait, you can't." "I can," Dominic said firmly, "and I will. HR will handle your severance. You're out." Scott didn't argue. He just nodded stiffly and walked out of the office. Dominic sighed, running a hand through his hair. He didn't enjoy firing people, but this had to happen. When he walked back into the showroom, everyone was watching. Elena and Marcus stood near the service area, looking shocked but hopeful. Dominic addressed the room. "Thank you for your hard work," he said calmly. "Things are going to be different starting today." He looked directly at Elena and Marcus. "You two, meet me after your shift. We need to talk." The tension started to lift, replaced by curiosity and relief. Dominic knew this was only the start, but for the first time in a while, he felt like he was moving his company in the right direction. Later, after the last client had left and the lights were dimmed, Elena and Marcus stood quietly by the counter. They both looked tired, but hope flickered in their eyes. The only sound was the hum of equipment from the service area as they waited for Dominic to speak. Dominic had spent the rest of the day watching everything closely, but didn't step in again. Now, it was time to take action. "All right, let's sit," he said, gesturing toward a sleek leather lounge area near the back of the showroom. He sat on one side, while Elena and Marcus hesitated before taking seats across from him. Dominic leaned forward, resting his arms on the glass coffee table between them. "First, I want to say thank you. I know today wasn't easy, especially with all that's been happening, but you both handled yourselves with care and professionalism. That's more than I can say for some of the leadership this place had before." Elena glanced at Marcus, unsure what to say, while Marcus nervously played with the edge of his work gloves. "I didn't know things had gotten this bad," Dominic admitted quietly. "That's my fault. I built this company to be a place where people feel respected, both employees and customers, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that." Elena finally spoke, her voice soft. "It's not all bad. I mean, I've had worse jobs, but it's been tough. I really do love helping the clients, though. I just wish—" She stopped, unsure if she should finish her thought. "Wish what?" Dominic asked gently. She sighed. "I just wish it felt like someone truly cared, not just about sales numbers or closing deals, but about us." Dominic nodded slowly, letting her words settle. "And you, Marcus?" Dominic asked. Marcus looked up, speaking quietly but with confidence. "To be honest, I didn't plan on staying long, but I couldn't leave, not with everything Elena and the others have to deal with. Someone has to support them." Dominic felt a wave of guilt. These two had kept the place going while he'd been trusting reports and missing what really mattered. "Well, that ends now," Dominic said firmly. "But I won't just tell you things will get better. I'm going to prove it." Elena and Marcus exchanged glances, a mix of curiosity and doubt in their eyes. "Here's what we're doing," Dominic continued. "First, I'm hiring a new manager, someone with experience who knows how to lead with respect. Until then, I'll be here personally to make sure things run right." Elena's eyes widened. "You're staying?" Dominic nodded. "For as long as it takes." Marcus tilted his head. "And Scott?" "He's not coming back," Dominic answered firmly. "I don't allow that kind of behavior, and neither should anyone here." Marcus let out a quiet breath, while Elena's shoulders relaxed like a weight had been taken off. "Second," Dominic added, "I'm changing how we staff the place. No more being short-handed during busy hours. We'll hire more people, and I'll make sure everyone gets proper breaks. You can't take care of high-end clients if you're running on empty." Elena smiled a little. "That would be amazing." "Third," Dominic said, his voice softening, "I want to reward you both for everything you've done to hold this place together." Elena and Marcus looked surprised. "Reward us?" Elena asked carefully. Dominic nodded. "Marcus, you've shown loyalty and leadership, even though you haven't been here long. I'm promoting you to service department supervisor. You'll get a raise and more stable hours." Marcus's mouth fell open. "Wait, are you serious? I've never been a supervisor before." Dominic smiled. "You already are. You've been stepping up when no one else did. That's what real leadership looks like." Marcus blinked, stunned. I don't even know what to say." "Thank you." Dominic turned to Elena. "And you, Elena, 8 months of dedication, even when things were falling apart. I see how much you care about clients and coworkers. You deserve more than just a thank you." Elena's eyes shimmered and she looked down, embarrassed. "I'm just doing my job." "You're doing much more than that," Dominic said kindly. "Starting next week, I'm giving you a solid raise, and I want to start a bonus system so hard work like yours doesn't go unnoticed." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, really?" "Really," Dominic said, smiling warmly. For a moment, none of them spoke as his words settled in. Then Elena whispered, "Thank you. I mean it. Thank you so much." Dominic leaned back, his face soft. "You've earned it." As they wrapped up, Dominic shared more of his plans to improve the showroom. He promised to upgrade outdated equipment, create a better work schedule, and hold regular team meetings to hear concerns. By the time they left the lounge area, both Elena and Marcus looked lighter. as if the stress they had carried for so long had finally eased. The next few weeks flew by. Dominic kept his word, spending several days at the showroom, working alongside the staff and listening to their ideas. He personally interviewed people for the manager job and eventually hired a man named Ryan, whose experience and kind leadership style quickly won over the team. Just like Dominic said, Elena and Marcus got their raises, and 3 new people were hired to help with the workload. The entire feel of the showroom changed. Clients noticed it too. Service was faster, and the staff seemed happy. One afternoon, as Dominic was about to leave for the corporate office, Elena stopped him at the door. "Hey," she said, smiling, "this place feels different now. Better. Like it actually matters." Dominic smiled back. "It does matter, and so do you." As he walked to his car, Dominic felt a pride he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about profits or growing the business anymore. It was about the people who made everything work. And he wasn't going to forget that again.